What is going on, everybody? Welcome back, and it is so good to be back after an epic 3-week Euro vacation with my wife. A special shout out to all of the international viewers out there that reached out with suggestions of places to go, tips for some cultural norms to be on the lookout for. Really, you guys helped improve our trip. So a special shout out to the international viewers. A great reminder that it's not just people from the States here on the channel. So thank you to all of you international viewers. And then for the people back home here in the States, happy 4th of July weekend, man. I guess like American exclusive holidays, 4th of July, Thanksgiving, mean it's time to dive into the Detroit Lions because we have the Lions coming in here at 24 in my 2022 NFL Power Rankings. Gonna be a fun one. Excited to get into it, but before we do, if you could just please take a second to hit that like button down below. It would really help me out. More likes equal more views, and new viewers into the channel here really would help support this series and my channel as we continue on with this big endeavor that is this deep dive series, now about a third of the way through. Also, if you enjoy, make sure you subscribe down below, turn on notifications so you do not miss a single deep dive team preview as we count down to the number one team in my rankings. But let's get into Detroit, who is now in year 2 of this really tear it down, full-on rebuild here under Dan Campbell. And it's a team that's undergone decades and decades of really just suffering and misery. And I love that they've really taken a step back and said, look, we got to really tear this thing up. We got to be patient with our head coach. We got to make the right moves and build this thing up from the ground up. And that's exactly what they've done. I think everybody agrees that Detroit is in the middle of the process of what is looking like a very promising rebuild. Really, ever since Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes took over here, every single move they've made makes sense and brings value to the team and has added upon the last move they've made. They're compounding good decisions, and it's leading to a lot of excitement and promise for this Lions team. Ranking 24th here coming into this season, that's going to be a good bit higher than I think a lot of people expect. This is the team that held the number 2 pick in the NFL draft last year. So it's going to be a really fun episode here to talk about a lot of those good moves that they've made, a lot of the young players that you should be aware of that are helping build something here in Detroit. And also to recap an offseason that was pretty damn good for Detroit. And I mentioned that the way that they're rebuilding this team makes a ton of sense. And when you want to think about a team that's tearing things down, building from the ground up, you want to see them play youth, retain the players that make sense for this team. And when you look at this team's offseason and their key departures, that's where it all begins. I mean, this list of departures for Detroit looks nothing like the 8 teams that we've done already in this series. Their losses are insignificant at best. Like, the coaching staff is mostly the same. They are letting Anthony Lynn go. It just didn't really work out with him as a play caller and the offensive coordinator. You know, he's more of a leader and a great running backs coach, but that's hardly a loss considering Dan Campbell had to take play calling duties from him already last season. They literally are losing nobody on the offense. Nobody. I guess, unless you want to count Kaderil Hodge, a wide receiver who's going to be fighting for a roster spot in Atlanta, who has a terrible wide receiving core. And then defensively, I mean, their biggest loss is Nick Williams, who's a 32-year-old defensive tackle who, hell, they could bring back before the season starts if they wanted to. He's still a free agent. Trey Flowers, technically a loss, but more of an addition by subtraction because he wasn't giving them what they were paying after he was wildly overpaid for a previous regime. So the cap space that he's going to open up for the future is going to be more valuable than what he was going to provide as a pass rusher, especially when you look at the additions to their pass rush. Jalen Reeves, Maven, Dean Marlowe, guys that are now backups on other teams, guys that played starting reps for them last year, but it's good process to move on from the guys that just aren't going to provide much more than replacement level players. So the list of departures all makes sense. And then you go to their additions, and this was a hell of an offseason, adding talent to position groups that they really needed. So it is worth noting Ben Johnson's going to be promoted internally as the offensive coordinator. We'll break down the staff as a whole in just a moment. But then you look at the offensive additions, and this isn't even including the return of a lot of guys that missed significant playing time or played hurt last year. Jared Goff, their quarterback, DeAndre Swift at running back, Taylor Decker at tackle. We do list Frank Ragnow coming back, who missed the majority of last season. He's probably their best player, TJ Hawkinson. So that's not even listing a lot of guys that they're actually getting back full health. This team suffered a ton of injuries on both sides of the ball, which is definitely worth noting when you want to talk about them exceeding the expected ranking here, coming in at 24. Yeah, this team only won 3 games last year, but they were in a ton of close games and had a lot of injuries. So just that alone, you can expect some regression back to the mean for this team to say they weren't really the second worst team in the NFL last year, despite having the number 2 pick. But it's not just getting guys back healthy here. They made some legitimate, significant additions to this team. Starting with DJ Chark in free agency. I love this move. I think this might have been the most value signing across the entire league, especially when you look at the contracts that all these receivers started getting. They were able to get Chark in there pretty quickly, and then you get, Christian Kirk making $73 million, Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, all these new receivers making $30 million almost every year. To get DJ Chark for $10 million on a 1-year deal, it's an absolute no-brainer. You also add speed in the draft in Jameson Williams, so significant upgrades at wide receiver. You do get Frank Ragnow back, as we mentioned, for my money, the best center in the NFL. Then Aiden Hutchinson with this number 2 overall pick, and Romeo Okwara, who they had paid significant money the year before, the offseason before last year. He's been a really productive pass rusher the last couple years. And then they even add Josh Pascal to the mix in the second round. So immense additions to the pass rush. And then huge additions to the secondary as well. You get Jeff Okudah back, who was the number 3 overall pick, had a down rookie season, but big expectations last year, gets hurt in the first game of the season. So effectively his second year for a top 5 pick, a top 3 pick as a cornerback. That's like getting another first rounder into the mix here. They signed Mike Hughes, another former first-round pick, had a good year for Kansas City last year. Deshaun Elliott, a starting safety from the Ravens. And then they draft Kirby Joseph out of Illinois. So just huge additions, an incredible offseason, a second offseason for Brad Holmes, who's, in my mind, one of the ascending top GMs in the league, comes over from the Rams and has just done a spectacular job kickstarting this rebuild and making it so year 2 here is going to have a lot of excitement and promise. And we'll talk about a lot more of this roster here in just a moment, but I do want to talk about the coach and scheme here, because that's also a significant chunk of really my optimism for Detroit. I love this coaching staff. Was a big fan of the Dan Campbell hire. I just think he's a hell of a football coach. You follow what he's done as a leader of men, going back to his interim year for the Dolphins, where, they played tough and physical. And then he goes to New Orleans, where, he's a tight ends coach, and every single tight end that came through there got better, improved as a blocker, became a more physical player, and developed physically. So, this guy can just coach and inspire human beings and football players. And when he comes in with the press conference last year, I'd have to go back and rewatch, but I'm pretty sure the tone of the deep dive was like, he's convincing. I want to run through a wall for Dan Campbell, but some coaches, say Joe Judge, who tries to do that, it doesn't always, get through to the players. And I think with Dan Campbell, it does. I think something about the way he leads is an effective leadership style. So I if nothing else, I love him as that CEO type of coach. Call it a John Harbaugh type of coach where, he's just overseeing the organization and making sure everybody's playing up to snuff and everything is in line. But that said, there's a little bit of intrigue with, is Dan Campbell actually a good X's and O's coach as well? When they hired him, that really was not the bill on him. He had never been a play caller or even really an offensive coordinator, a guy that, was drawing up plays and orchestrating an offense. Sure, he was an offensive coach, but again, that was never really the bill on him. He comes to Detroit, and that was Anthony Lynn's job. But Dan Campbell, of course, was overseeing the offense and eventually made the decision that this just isn't working. And he took over play calling, and the offense did look different under Dan Campbell. And shit, man, I was impressed. I thought he did a good job in that role. So year 2 now as the kind of offensive overseer here, what is this all going to look like? And we're going to get more clarity on that in time because they also have Ben Johnson. But as far as Dan Campbell's kind of coaching background and what his scheme looks like, he's going to adapt his scheme just as Sean Payton always did in New Orleans, where Campbell did the majority of his offensive learning. But he also has more kind of modern pro spread backgrounds as you go back to his time in Miami, where he coached under Joe Philbin, who was a Mike McCarthy and Aaron Rodgers guy, descending from that Mike Holmgren kind of modern pro spread coaching tree. So between Sean Payton and under Joe Philbin, he really has that sort of spread background, if you will. But as we saw last year, he's not afraid to come out in 13 personnel and run a power I offense. He's going to adapt his offense to what he feels his personnel can do best. And now with some better receiving options coming in this year, we might see them open it up a little bit more to look a little bit more like those Drew Brees, Aaron Rodgers-led offenses, at least schematically speaking. And all of that kind of permeates down to Ben Johnson, who gets promoted here, has been in-house with Detroit going back to the Matt Patricia days under Darrell Bevell, who ironically is also in that sort of Holmgren tree, who all the way back kind of learned at the very beginning of Darrell Bevell's career in Green Bay under McCarthy and Holmgren. So ironically, similar backgrounds there. But Ben Johnson, also a pretty good resume. He learned under Mike Martz, who Adam Gase learned under. I put Peyton Manning in there because that was kind of Peyton Manning's offense in Denver. But Ben Johnson was in Miami both with Dan Campbell and then actually stayed there when Adam Gase was promoted to or hired as the head coach. So another guy with a lot of that sort of, modern pro spread. Mike Martz, Mike Holmgren, and all of their disciples were kind of some of the early innovators of the modern passing game, if you will. So, you've got some good experience here and some good modern thinkers, and it's a staff that definitely still has a lot to prove, but two guys that I think are very qualified to put together a well-run offense here. So I actually ranked Dan Campbell as a head coach 15th, and that is mostly about his leadership ability and kind of the rah-rah fight mentality that really did show for this Lions team. Despite only winning 3 games, this was a super scrappy, resilient team that all the way through the end of the season was not giving up, despite them not being a very good football team. And that's an endorsement of Dan Campbell's leadership abilities. But then on the defensive side of the ball, you've got Aaron Glenn, who, I know the results have not been there quite yet. He's a young guy, was dealing with a Detroit defense, and his first year as defensive coordinator, they just straight up didn't have the bodies. Too many injuries, was not a great roster to begin with, and there's only so much you can do unless you're like Bill Belichick with a measly roster to have a really good defense. So year 2 is definitely going to be important for him, but just you ask around the league, people respect the hell out of Aaron Glenn. went right into being a defensive backs coach after being a player for Mike Pettin in Cleveland, when those defenses, at least the first year under Mike Pettin, was really good. And then he goes and gets a job with the Saints, where he learned under Dennis Allen. So he's a multiple scheme, or his scheme is very multiple, at least from what we've seen. In Cleveland, you have that kind of attacking 3-4 type of Rex Ryan defense. And then with the Saints, much more, man up, 4-3 fronts, just a different scheme under Dennis Allen. So he's drawn from both and really rounding out a coaching staff that's just very adaptable and smart and excellent leaders as well, between Dan Campbell and Aaron Glenn. I think Dan Campbell even said like he was relieved that New Orleans didn't bring Aaron Glenn back to be their head coach when Sean Payton retired. So he needs to really prove that he is a good defensive coordinator, because we can't rank him too high based on what we saw last year. But I fully believe by the end of the year, he will exceed my ranking of 27th for defensive coaching. And it's not just Aaron Glenn, that's a culture thing as a whole for Detroit. So I'm optimistic for Aaron Glenn. I think he's an excellent young ascending defensive mind, and Detroit is lucky to have him along with the rest of these guys. I don't know a ton about Ben Johnson, to be honest, but we're going to learn a lot more about him this year. So there we go with the staff. And now let's get into the meat and bones and talk about this roster that's very fascinating. Now, what's not particularly fascinating is Jared Goff and the quarterback room. Now, I will say, even though he's not terribly exciting, I do think Jared Goff is pretty freaking underrated at this point, because he's being lumped in with this sort of, treading water backup type of guy, someone that you'll see ranked as like a bottom 5 starter in the league. And he is not that bad. Like, the Rams were right to move on from him. He's a quarterback that you win with, not because of, and they needed more. They wanted Matthew Stafford, and they were right to go upgrade from Jared Goff to Stafford. And the Lions are hoping within a year or two that their team will be ready, as the Rams team was ready, to make that upgrade. But as we sit here today, Jared Goff isn't some massively different quarterback than he was with the Rams, where he always kind of floated between being about the 15th to 20th best quarterback in the league. Right now, I see him on the lower end of that. Maybe he has lost a little confidence and all that stuff, but I don't think so. I think it's really just a surrounding core situation, and it was one of the worst in the league last year when you look at the injuries and the existing talent there. So there's just only so far that Jared Goff, who needs to play from the pocket and isn't going to improvise and expand beyond the confines of the scheme and the offense and the players, there was just only so much a Jared Goff could do. But now the situation, as we'll talk about, is looking much better. So I rank Detroit 19th for a quarterback, and I think people are almost sleeping on Jared Goff a little bit because he was a throw-in in the trade for Matthew Stafford. He didn't have a good year last year. He missed some times with injury, but I think Detroit was right to stand by Jared Goff. No need to go get a Baker Mayfield or a Marcus Mariota or anything like that. No, they've got their guy that's kind of driving the ship right now, and you'll get in a situation where you can make that aggressive move to go get a quarterback, whether it's in the draft or maybe a Kyler Murray comes available or something like that. They will be poised to hopefully bring a new quarterback in to an offense that Jared Goff helped establish some routine and comfortability with the offense. So that's the value of having a Jared Goff, is the team doesn't just implode with Tim Boyle running the show all year, So I like having Jared Goff here, and I think he's going to have a much better year this year than he did last year. The backups, you got Tim Boyle, who I think has shown to be a capable backup, stepped in and looked the part as far as being a backup. He's not much more than that. David Blau as well has gotten some starts in the league, so you've got some depth. I think they might just roll with 3 guys at quarterback. Blau might get cut, but at the end of the day, that doesn't really matter. Let's get to the more exciting portion of the passing game here, and that is this receiving core. This group I talked about earlier, the things that Detroit do, their moves make sense. And I look at this receiving core, it just makes so much freaking sense. I think the modern NFL, it's almost more important, I think, to say, get yourself 3, 4, or 5 versatile, explosive weapons that, even if you don't have a true number one, get guys that skill sets play off of each other well, that have defined roles that you can really deploy in the right way. And this Lions group, I don't know if there's a group of 5 that just make more sense together than what Detroit has. So you have DJ Chark, who they sign, a true deep threat who can play on the outside, take the top off the defense, keep defenses honest, but threaten enough with hitches, comebacks, deep digs, slants, you name it, so that if you do back off, he'll make you pay. And then Jameson Williams is just a younger, more explosive version of DJ Chark. Now, if you can get these guys healthy, which is going to be a question mark, you will have on both sides of the offense on the perimeter huge deep threats that are both excellent working underneath as well, especially Jameson Williams. One of the biggest things I had in his scouting report was how rare he's able to throttle down and stop and turn on a hitch route. So if he can get back out there quickly and establish a chemistry with Jared Goff, it's almost impossible to defend this team, because you're going to have these guys underneath that I'll talk about. But if you play off of Jameson Williams because you're afraid of his, what would have been 4.2 speed if he wasn't coming off an ACL injury, if you play off of him, he's just going to kill you with hitch routes and stop routes and all that kind of stuff underneath. And you're just going to be sitting there throwing your arms up. And Jared Goff is definitely a good enough quarterback to maximize that. So there's your perimeter receiving game between DJ Chark and Jameson Williams. There is a health question mark on both of those guys. However, DJ Chark has had a hard time staying out there healthy the last couple years, and Jameson Williams, a slender guy coming off an ACL injury for Bama in January. So you hope you can get these guys both out there, but I do believe that their health and ability to stay on the field is going to be paramount for this offense kind of exceeding expectations this year. But those are just your perimeter receivers. You look now kind of into the slot and into that short to intermediate game. This group, again, just makes so much sense together. You've got a true slot receiver in St. Brown, a borderline top 5 tight end in TJ Hawkinson, and DeAndre Swift, who I firmly believe is capable of more than he showed last year as a receiving back, who I thought had flashes of Alvin Kamara coming out of Georgia. So let's start with Amon-Ra St. Brown. Was one of the most pleasantly surprising rookies in the entire NFL last year. And it really picked up kind of into the, I guess, back, 2/3 of the season, where they discovered that he is a dominant slot receiver that was ready to go immediately. And he's not some guy that's going to win on the outside. He's a guy with 4.6 speed, someone that doesn't have the size and speed to stack and win on the outside. But he dominates with quickness and awareness and instincts from the slot. Think Hunter Renfrow. Think, in some ways, Cooper Kupp. He finds space in zone. He's aggressive, attacking the ball in traffic with bodies around him. He's shifty after the catch. He has lightning quick foot speed and route running ability. Above all, he clearly has that elite mind for the game that is required to be that dominant slot receiver like a Julian Edelman or a Hunter Renfrow. And I do believe Amon-Ra St. Brown is on a fast track to being in that conversation. So a huge year last year. Now, he is what he is. He's a slot guy. And Detroit fans were like, who would you rather have, Amon-Ra St. Brown or guys like Rashad Bateman, maybe, like first-round talents? And it's still Rashad Bateman for me. Those guys bring a skill set that St. Brown just can't bring to the table. But for him to step in so quickly, you feel so good about what he's going to bring to the table this year from the slot. And then you have TJ Hawkinson, who definitely battled injuries last year, missed some games, played hurt some games, was not able to ascend to surefire top 5 tight end contention. And maybe he'll never do that. I think he still has maybe a year to show that he could be a Mark Andrews or a Travis Kelce type. I think he's probably more of like a Hunter Henry, if that makes sense. He's just not some insane athlete to run away from linebackers. After the catch, he's tough, but he's not ultra explosive like a Darren Waller or Kyle Pitts. So he's a very good tight end. You're excited to get him back healthy. And you talk about stick routes, crossing routes, tight end screens, coming open over the middle of the field late. Like, he is going to provide another intermediate target for Jared Goff, who's super reliable and a big catch radius that you don't necessarily have with a lot of these guys. And then DeAndre Swift, who's going to be more of your check down screen guy, running angle routes out of the backfield, sticking to that role. He can use his shiftiness after the catch, improve those hands a little bit, and round out what looks like one of the most logical receiving cores in the league as far as skill sets that will play off of each other. A lot of this is these guys getting back healthy and meeting their potential with pretty much everybody other than Amon-Ra St. Brown, who we feel incredibly sure about at this point, I think. But they rank 20th for now, and I think that's pretty much worst case scenario. I think if you can get Jameson and DJ Chark to stay healthy, you get Hawkinson to get back to 2020 form, and DeAndre Swift takes a next step up, this is going to be a top 10, maybe even like top 6 or 7 group of weapons, and a healthy Jared Goff can help get the most out of that group as well. And another really nice thing about this group of weaponry, at least with the receivers, is you have super like-minded backups that can seamlessly step in the events of injuries. So when you're talking about Jameson Williams trying to rush back from an ACL injury, or DJ Chark, who's had a hard time staying healthy, to have a Josh Reynolds as a backup for both of those guys on the perimeter is one of the best wide receiver 4s in the league. And they go and get him last year, a guy that had chemistry with Jared Goff going back to his time with the Rams. He stepped right in and showed to be a capable starting caliber receiver, someone that clearly they felt they could upgrade. But to have him as a wide receiver 4, a contested catch target on the outside, a guy that's a capable route runner for a bigger bodied guy, he just doesn't have the speed of Chark or Jameson Williams. But if you've got one of these guys going down, or you start the year and Jameson Williams can't get out there right away, you could do a hell of a lot worse than Josh Reynolds. And then even behind him, you have Quintez Cephas, who honestly could have been listed as a key addition. He missed most of last season, only played 4 games, but he's shown to be a perfect wide receiver 4 type as well. I liked him coming out, called him kind of a poor man's Marvin Jones, great landing spot in Detroit. Honestly, one of the better ball tracking contested catch winners in the league. He just doesn't have that speed and athleticism to be a great separator. So, Reynolds and Cephas are great perimeter players to have as backups. And then Khalif Raymond is more of that Amon-Ra St. Brown replacement in the unfortunate event of injury. Someone that can, line up in the slot, be kind of that gadget type, a guy that you can manufacture touches for, but also someone that honestly has some surprising speed for a smaller guy as well. So not a spitting image of St. Brown, but would make sense as the replacement in the slot. Tom Kennedy played a little bit in the slot as well. Trinity Benson got on the field. We'll see if those guys even make the team. I look at those top 6 receivers and say, there's your 6. And they really didn't do a whole lot as far as undrafted free agents or late round draft picks to try and upgrade from your depth. I think they like those 6. If a Benson or a Kennedy or maybe Corey Sutton, Josh Johnson, if they really pop in camp, maybe they keep a 7th. But all in all, I like the top 6 at wide receiver. The tight end depth, the running back depth, it's not quite as good, especially in the receiving game. You got Brock Wright, who got on the field last year when Hawkinson was getting hurt. They also loved big personnel, so he showed he's capable. I don't think there's too much more than him as like a tight end 3 type. They draft James Mitchell, who is an interesting pick. He missed his final season in college, someone that was entering the year with expectations and just wasn't able to stay healthy and prove it. Was honestly a little surprised he declared. I thought he would get that medical red shirt and go back, but if he even needed it with the extra COVID year of eligibility, but maybe just felt pro ready and could surprise. Very sure-handed guy. He's rocked up. He looks the part. Just want to see him improve as a blocker and in his routes as a tight end, but not a terrible 5th-round pick there, James Mitchell. They bring in Garrett Griffin, who worked with Dan Campbell for the Saints, had his best year in 2020 as a run blocker for them. And then Devin Funchess, you got to keep an eye on him. He just keeps hanging around here, big-bodied, athletic guy. Frankly, I'm surprised a team hasn't tried to make him a tight end sooner. He actually flirted with some tight end at Michigan, and I think he can do it if he puts his mind to it. I think work ethic has been something that's held Devin Funchess back, but if Dan Campbell can light a fire under Devin Funchess' ass, like he could be a great wing tight end, and they did that actually in New Orleans with a couple wide receiver types that put on weight and played tight end. So I think you've got to keep an eye on Devin Funchess. I'll give him a chance, but he's got to make the team first. They also had Derek Deese out of San Diego State. I think him along with Shane Zylstra, who played about 3 games last year for Detroit. Those guys will compete. It's just going to be a crowded room, so we'll see if they make it. Then with the running backs, I don't love the rest of these guys from a receiving standpoint. You've got Jamal Williams, who's an excellent pass blocker, so he'll get out there occasionally. But just, not an explosive guy. His routes don't really shake linebackers or anything like that. But he's fine as a backup running back out of the backfield. Craig Reynolds, kind of a bruising type, along with Jamar Jefferson, kind of similar to Jamal Williams. Godwin Igwebuike. I thought I was going to get it. I didn't. Godwin Igwebuike, one of my favorite players, coming out of Northwestern as like a late-round flyer as a safety years ago. And makes the conversion to running back and showed some exciting flashes. This guy had remarkable agility testing and stuff, so he's a good athlete. Making the position change to running back, we'll see if he makes the team, and if he does, keep an eye on him to be kind of a scat back option in year 2 at the position that could surprise. But there is your weaponry for the passing game, ranking 20th, and you get Jameson Williams healthy and on the field developing in the NFL. That's going to be big towards this group ascending beyond that ranking. But I think 20th is like a worst case scenario for a pretty talented deep group. And then we're going to talk about the O-line in 2 ways, but first as a pass blocking unit, and then we'll rank the passing game as a whole here. I rank them 7th for pass blocking. This is a really talented offensive line that I thought last year was going to emerge as a top 5 unit, but you just had some injuries with Frank Ragnow going down. Taylor Decker missed some time. Penei Sewell had a bit of a slow start, so they just weren't able to really get there. But even in those first few weeks when this group was healthy together, they had some moments of like, all right, here we go. And then it just wasn't able to finish out the year. But this really has the potential to be the best offensive line in the league. You've got a cornerstone tackle duo right now with Taylor Decker, who's straight up one of the best pass protecting left tackles in the league. At worst, he's a top 10 guy, maybe top 7, top 8, just very sound. If he stays healthy, you've got your blind side protector that you just don't have to worry about. And then you've Penei Sewell on the other side, who started the year a little bit slow. Seemed to have a little bit of adjustment as far as hand-eye coordination and switching over to that right side of the offensive line, and just was not a particularly polished pass protector coming out of Oregon either. So there was definitely a learning curve there. I expect him to look much more like he did in the second half of last season, where he was playing like a top 10 right tackle or so, if not better. He, to me, is one of the best tackle prospects I've ever evaluated, and I thought it was a steal for them to get him even at, pick 6 or pick 7 when they took him. So, to me, Penei Sewell has potential to be a Trent Williams level elite offensive tackle. And man, if he hits that in year 2, you're popping champagne. But even if he's just as good as he was in the second half of last year, you feel damn good about that. So he's definitely trending up. And now that he's comfortable and has a full offseason to really prep at right tackle, I got big expectations for Penei Sewell to be in that kind of Pro Bowl conversation at right tackle. So you love your tackle duo. And then, oh, by the way, you got Frank Ragnow at center coming back, who, if he were healthy last year, I think would have securely cemented himself as the clear-cut best center in the NFL. He deletes people in the run game, and it does not matter if it's inside zone, outside zone, power. He can do it all. He's an athlete. He's a people mover. He's got the dickhead mentality you want to see, a strong guy. Like, he is, to me, the best center in the NFL, period. And can get even better, frankly. Like, I think he can get to be the way we felt about, say, Travis Frederick years ago, where like, okay, this is one of the best offensive linemen in the NFL, period. So a big year for Frank Ragnow as well. I think pass pro is where you look at him and say, like, he's just not elite, but he's damn good at it. So there's your kind of, you've got a tackle center trio that is, I would say, the best in the league. I can't think of, off the top of my head, anyone that would exceed what you have here. And then your guard situation is not a disaster. I floated with the idea of this team taking Ikem Ekwonu and plugging him in at guard and just having like an absurd offensive line. And when I look at this, I still kind of wish it happened. Not that I'm not excited about Aiden Hutchinson, but man, that'd be super fun. So if you're wondering how they don't rank first for pass protection, it's the guard situation that, these guys aren't weak links. I mean, they are relative to the other guys here. Like, they're not liabilities, I should say. But they're not really strengths either. Both Vaitai and Jonah Jackson will lose in pass protection, especially against quicker guys and stunts. Like, they just can't really change lanes and handle all that stuff for different reasons. I think Jonah Jackson, just from a technique standpoint, the footwork, the hand placement, the blitz awareness, it's all just getting there with Jonah Jackson. We'll talk about what he brings as a run blocker in a moment, but from a pass protection standpoint, he's far from a sure thing. I think this is a big year for him to establish himself as a established starting, guard in that department. And then Hal Vaitai, making way too much money here. The previous regime gave him a crap load of money, but sliding into guard here, his first full season as a straight up guard could help him. Just not the best athlete. So when he goes against quicker guys, he will have a hard time matching and mirroring with his feet. But huge dude, great anchor, a tough guy. You could do worse than Vaitai at guard, but at that price tag, it does sting a little bit. But these guys aren't liabilities, but they're not huge strengths in pass protection either. And they drag the overall pass blocking grade down just a little bit from what it would be based on just the tackles in the center here. As far as the depth goes, really don't like the tackle depth here. Matt Nelson played last year, converted from either D end or tight end at Iowa, but just struggled in pass protection last year. A good athlete. They bring him in as like a big tight end as well, because he is an athletic dude and a decent run blocker, but from a pass protection standpoint, you really don't want to see him back out there next year. You're hoping Sewell and Decker can stay healthy. Dan Skipper continues to hang around here. Dude's like 6'9". He's got some length. He can get in people's way. Obinna Eza is kind of a young Hal Vaitai in a lot of ways. Huge dude, just technique-wise all over the map. So we'll see if he makes the team and can kind of learn and maybe a long shot to replace Hal Vaitai as a big-bodied kind of swing tackle, maybe. On the interior, loved what we saw from Evan Broughton last year. Undersized center, will struggle with power as a pass protector, but just a tough dude, plays with leverage and good technique. So he can probably slide in there at guard or center and be kind of a swing man on the interior. So you like the depth there. Logan Stenberg, was he a third-round pick? I think it was a fourth-round pick several years ago. Missed last year due to injury, so I think he steps in as a capable backup who maybe is a little better than we know him to be, who just hasn't played a whole lot. Tommy Kramer got on the field for a couple starts last year, was replacement level depth for offensive line. Ryan McCollum also played, but he was not nearly as good as, say, Tommy Kramer was. So there's your interior offensive line depth. We'll see if Jarvis or Zion Obed make the team. And again, ranking 7th for pass blocking. So a pretty good surrounding core here for Jared Goff and this passing game. They're going to rank 21st for passing game. I don't think this team is going to suck moving the ball. While you are never going to be terribly excited about Jared Goff throwing the ball around, you could do a hell of a lot worse than, to me, a surrounding core that if everything goes right, you could have a top 5 O-line and a top 10 receiving core pretty easily if these guys all hit. And I feel pretty good about this coaching staff to kind of get those guys there as well. So that's where the optimism for this team really lives, is with that receiving core and with the O-line. But let's talk a little bit about the run game now before we get into the defensive side of the ball. So let's just revisit that O-line real quick. I know we talked a little bit about some of these guys already, but they rank 5th for run blocking, and that will include the skill player blocking that we'll hit on here in just a moment. But from left to right, really, you got Taylor Decker, who I will say is a little bit better moving backwards than he is moving forward, but a more than capable run blocker. Feel very solid about what you're getting there. You've got Jonah Jackson, that is a very physical player and an athletic player off the ball. And like Frank Ragnow, he's an effective run blocker. He can run inside zone. He can do a double team and climb to the second level. You can pull him on power. He has the athleticism to do that. He can drive guys and down block in power if you're not pulling him. So I do think Jonah Jackson is always going to have a place in the NFL because he is a really good run blocker. It is just is he going to take that next step in pass pro this year? And we'll find out. Ragnow, as I said, I think he's the best run blocking center in the league, at least considering every type of run. I think Kelsey obviously is the best outside zone blocker in the league, but I don't think there's anybody else that you can ask to block at an elite level in any sort of run concept. So he allows for a lot of flexibility up front. Clearly going to help this ranking of 5th for run blocking. Hal Vaitai, not a guy you want really pulling. He's just not a good athlete. You don't really want him on outside zone either. So if you want him to drive guys up front, he can do that. But just the lack of athleticism and get off, it leads to some issues when you want to talk about him getting leverage and getting to spots. That's where his weaknesses are. And then Penei Sewell, as soon as Trent Williams is gone, I think Penei Sewell, let me rephrase this. When Trent Williams retires in, let's just say, 3 years, I believe Penei Sewell will be the best run blocking tackle in the NFL. There's certain things when it comes to, assignment awareness and always playing fast and knowing who to pick up at the second level that just comes with experience. Sewell's only 21 years old, but get off, strength, tenacity, size, it's all there for Penei Sewell. It was at Oregon, and it was really there in the second half of last season at right tackle. So I can't speak highly enough about Sewell and what he's going to be as a run blocker and what he is right now. So it's a really good people-moving group up front. We hinted at the backups. The only 2 guys really worth mentioning from a run block perspective would be Matt Nelson, who I kind of talked about. He's a good athlete, can get on the move and run block a little bit. And Evan Brown similarly lacks some play strength, but if you were to ask him to move, he can do it. So there's your offensive line run blocking. And now let's talk about the rest of the skill players and how they contribute to the run game. Let's just stick on the topic of blocking for a moment. All 3 of their starting receivers, I would just say, are adequate. I think DJ Chark could play with better effort. Amon-Ra St. Brown, he's a little bit undersized, so it is a little bit harder for him to stick on blocks, but the effort is there. And then Jamison Williams he's got the effort for it. Nick Saban always coaches these guys how to run block, but a very slender player. So for different reasons, these guys all are just adequate run blockers. I think DJ Chark, with Dan Campbell coaching him, could really be inspired to be a much better run blocker than he showed to be in Jacksonville. The only other receiver I want to mention is Quintez Cephas. When he's on the field, he's got that Wisconsin run game pedigree. He mauls dudes, and he's got the strength to do it. So I think Cephas and a little bit of Josh Reynolds rotating in there are guys to keep an eye on that can sustain blocks on the outside. For your tight end group, Hawkinson's a good run blocker. I'm surprised he hasn't already cemented himself as like a top 3 run blocking tight end in the league based on what we saw from him out of Iowa and how strong he is as a player. It just hasn't all come together for him. It has been far from a problem for TJ Hawkinson. I think he can continue to get better, but you feel pretty good about him as your lead tight end. He's that true Y tight end who can block defensive ends, and they will ask him to do that, and he can hold his own. Then you got Brock Wright, James Mitchell, very unproven as blockers. Garrett Griffin in 2020 under Dan Campbell did have a very good year as a blocker. So they do have, all these tight ends do have the best tight end coach in the league in Dan Campbell. So that's always going to help. And then we kind of mentioned Devin Funchess. If he can learn how to block, he could certainly prove to be some bit of a weapon here. Also got to mention Jason Kabinda, who is a former linebacker and looks like it when he blocks. I mean, he's still learning the position, but man, when he arrives, he definitely will pancake dudes and hit people as if he was a linebacker. So I liked him coming out as a linebacker. It's fun to see him make it as a fullback here, and he's a relevant player for a team that loves to go power I a lot of the time. But then lastly, the running back ranking. They only ranked 20th at running back. A big part of that is DeAndre Swift just had a disappointing year last year. I honestly thought, and I know some of it was health, and I still like DeAndre Swift, but coming into the year, I thought he was going to be, let's just say, like a top 5 fantasy football running back. I really thought they would lean into him, and he would show the vision and the contact balance and the breakaway speed. And it's not that he was bad, he just didn't really meet those expectations. And this is a big year for Swift, honestly, to prove that he can be a good, to great starting running back. He was my number 1 running back in that class, just ahead of Jonathan Taylor. And right now, that's obviously a huge mistake. He's never going to be Jonathan Taylor, but you want to see him, show the upside that was the reason you drafted him over Jonathan Taylor, basically. So I still think he has it in him to be healthy and have a big year, but he could just be, a good running back instead of a great running back. And this is going to be a huge year to find out what his upside is going to be. You got Jamal Williams, who is maxed out, but he gives it his absolute all on every single play. He is that kind of tough power back who's just kind of a true jack of all trades, master of none type of running back. He's fine as an RB2. He just doesn't offer an ounce of explosiveness. So it just kind of is what it is with him. Very similar with Craig Reynolds, Jamar Jefferson. Both guys, I think, if called upon to move the chains, average 3.5, 4 yards a carry behind this offensive line, and make the defense feel their presence as tough dudes, can do that, but neither offer the explosiveness to be much more. And Godwin Igwebuike, I don't know that he'll ever be a true good running back, just with that lack of experience. He is up there in age already. I would more have my eyes on him as kind of a RB4 scat back backup type and maybe a kick returner. But Greg Bell, I'm not particularly familiar with. Don't see him making the team over these guys. So they ranked 20th at running back, but definitely potential to be better than that. But definitely stock down a little bit on DeAndre Swift, though I do believe in him still. I do believe in the talent. A guy I compared to Alvin Kamara coming out. I don't know if he'll ever be that good, but clearly this Saints staff in New Orleans saw a similar skill set to Alvin Kamara, and I think he can be something like that. So we'll see what Swift can hold this year. Already kind of talked about this staff. They do rank 17th because to me, Dan Campbell is just, the run game requires effort and the desire to run block. And Dan Campbell is going to inspire that in them. And then 0% for the QB run multiplier. Not getting a whole lot of added production in the read option game or from play action boots from Jared Goff. So they do rank 15th. Obviously, 5th in run blocking is going to help a lot. I think you need to see big steps up from DeAndre Swift. I want to see the receivers step up as well as run blockers. I think that group has potential to be a better run blocking group than they've shown in years past, especially with Dan Campbell coaching them. But a team that I think will be able to move the ball on the ground, and especially with that offensive line, just clear some good lanes for these guys. So they rank 20th for overall offense, which is surprisingly solid for a Detroit Lions team that did not have a particularly good offense last year. But you look at all the pieces they added, the guys that got getting back healthy, and it starts to make a lot more sense. So I do think it's going to be a relative strength for Detroit is this offense, because as we look at the defense, it is what drags this team down from 20th on offense down to 24th for the overall team rankings. As we start with the pass defense, they rank 28th in the league, and this group just really has a lack of talent in a lot of places. They have some really intriguing talent in important spots as well, but I do think, from a defensive perspective, they're a year or two away from having a well-rounded talent core to be really scared of this defense. But they're building something. It's not going to happen overnight, and that starts with the pass rush, where I do rank them 23rd. They were one of, if not the worst pass rushes in the league last year. So getting Aiden Hutchinson, the most pro-ready impact pass rusher, certainly in this draft, but probably overall player in this entire draft. And they really didn't think they were going to get him at number 2. From Michigan, highly productive season, and he gives them someone to put on the poster. He, for my money, will probably be a captain by the end of his first season, if he isn't already. And just refined skill set, high effort guy, a good, not great athlete. I think his get off is great. His strength at his size is just very solid, and can win in a lot of different ways. But for me, he was my number 2 edge guy. I just want to note that because of the lack of true juice and bend at the position that I think provides that super high upside at the next level. But I did my Aiden Hutchinson eval about 3 weeks after I made my Max Crosby film room, and it really felt like I was watching the same guy. Physically speaking, they're both tall, lengthy, powerful white dudes who have great get off, an excellent first step, can win with a bull rush as kind of their biggest threat, and then they mix in a swim or a spin or a rip move, different ways that keep tackles honest. Both guys have a really sound understanding of the different techniques the tackles are going to use to stop their bull rush or stop their other moves, and they just can use different tools out of the belt. They're like Batman. They'll just bring out different stuff to beat you with. What they can't really beat you with is that speed and bend around the corner. And that to me is kind of that ultimate trump card that is just always going to keep tackles honest, that they have to get enough depth to defend against your speed and bend around the corner. And once you have that fear factor of that, you've pretty much already won. So I do think the margin for error for a guy like Aiden Hutchinson's just a little bit smaller, but I don't want to talk down on Aiden Hutchinson, man. I have no qualms with them picking him number 2. And frankly, for the Detroit Lions, who needed that instant impact, a face for this defense, a hometown guy that's going to really help this culture, I think I might have even made that pick of Hutchinson over a guy like Kayvon Thibodeau, even though I had Tibbs as my number 1 edge. But an automatic upgrade to this edge group over, Trey Flowers and, Charles Harris. We'll talk about a good year last year, but obviously they feel Aiden Hutchinson is going to be a star for them, but a rookie that needs to prove it. And then Romeo Okwara missed most of last season, and he's a stud. Straight up, like, he's going to get you probably 55, 60 pressures. He's a 10 to 12 sack guy. the ideal number 2 rusher. So with Hutchinson now on the opposite side, you're going to be able to, do some different stuff with Charles Harris rotating in, who they did pay a decent amount of money. A former first-round pick that had a huge year for Detroit last year, was their best pass rusher. So excellent depth there. Few teams have a third edge guy as good as Charles Harris was for Detroit last year. And then you even have, Julian Okwara, Romeo's brother. Still love that combo, Romeo and Julian. How can you not? And these guys even play off each other really well. But I don't know how much Julian's going to get on the field, because you've got Charles Harris. You've obviously got Okwara and Hutch. And then they also, in the second round, draft Josh Pascal, who was kind of an edge hybrid at Kentucky, plays at about 270 pounds. And his role here is going to be interesting to see what they do with him. Personally, I list him at edge because that's what his playing weight is. That's what he was really at Kentucky. And we haven't seen him really play interior. But when I look at all these guys around him that we just talked about, I would bet they see him as more of a maybe Danico Autry, or even like a Cam Jordan, if you look at what Aaron Glenn had for the Saints, as someone that is going to be more of an interior rusher on third down. And that's a pretty good transition to the interior defensive line, because this group sucks. It is the worst interior defensive line in the league, period, end of sentence, bar none. So you look at all the talent they have at edge, you look at Pascal, who's incredibly strong, one of the best run defending edge players I've ever seen. I thought he was really neck and neck with Trayvon Walker in that department. Showed some power, and when he did win as a pass rusher, it was from the interior. I don't think he's a 3-down interior guy at 270, 275 pounds. Maybe they do ask him to bulk up, and that is his role long term, but that will probably take some time. He's just a very interesting player, especially when you look at the other pieces here. So very excited to see how they use him. Again, I list him at edge. I fully expect him to be more of an interior player and to play a third down kind of, pass rushing role. I think especially with his get off and ability to kind of distract the offensive line on stunts and stuff, so that you can get these athletic guys like Harris and Okwara to kind of wrap in and around. That's just kind of the role I see for him. The edge depth doesn't even stop there. You have Austin Bryant, who played okay last year. We'll see if he even makes this team. They draft James Houston, who's another kind of tweener type. We'll see where they use him. I almost listed him at linebacker, but he was an edge guy in college, an ultra productive player out of, what was it, Sam Houston State or something like that. But we'll see if he makes the team and then what his role will be. But a productive kind of bendy pass rusher that's really undersized, looks more like an off-ball linebacker. So maybe they see him as more of that Derek Barnes edge convert to off-ball linebacker type. And then even John Kaminsky, the fact that he's here is, I don't want to say unfair, but it's pretty crazy how much depth they have. John Kaminsky is a pretty solid player. I was surprised Atlanta didn't retain him. Fourth-round pick in 2019. Had a good 2020 season, both as a run defender and as a kind of rotational pass rusher. And he misses 2021 with injuries, so they clearly like him. I don't know if there's room for him on this roster. Maybe he can add some weight and play interior, but I had to put those eyes next to him on the image there, because I think for him to be your 8th edge player is pretty crazy. So keep an eye on him at least making the team. So this is, probably the deepest edge room in the entire league. I don't know if you have your true number 1 this year, but man, it's a good edge group. What's dragging this down from being maybe the 18th best pass rush is this interior defensive line group. It's a fucking wasteland, dude. Like, this is horrible. They are putting a ton of stock in Michael Brockers to return to 2019 form, in Lee McNeil to take a big step up, in Levi and Wuzurike. Let me just read some numbers for you guys. So Michael Brockers played 305 pass rush snaps for this team last year. He had 6 pressures. 6 pressures on 305 pass rush snaps. That is an unacceptable rate. That is probably what you would expect from anybody else on this depth chart, guys like Eric Banks and Bruce Hector. So you have a guy getting full-time snaps in Michael Brockers, getting you no pressure. Now, the 2 years before that, he was like a 30 pressure guy with Aaron Donald next to him. But man, at 30, he's going to turn 32 years old this year. You expect him to get back to that after what he did last year? I don't. I'll save Aleem McNeil because he's the one guy I'm relatively optimistic about. But Levi Onwuzurike, to continue reading some numbers here, in his rookie season, he got 184 pass rush snaps, 3 pressures. Just an absolute wasteland of interior pass rush production from the Detroit Lions. So your best hopes are, maybe Onwuzurike is much better in year 2. We'll see. I mean, young defensive tackles, just, you look around the league, it just has not been, it hasn't been good. But Aleem McNeil, I do think has a good chance. And I had a pretty close grade between McNeil and Onwuzurike, and really was not surprised that McNeil was the better impact player because he, had the strength to hold up immediately at the next level. Whereas Onwuzurike is just a really light, quick guy who I think really struggled to get off blocks. I think McNeil has that strength to his game, and he dropped some weight from being a true nose in college and showed a lot more foot speed to actually contribute as a pass rusher at times. And took some time for him to get on the field. But, he's a guy that, was getting you a couple pressures each week in the last month of the season, got a couple sacks, and looked like he can be some bit of a pass rush presence on the inside. But even that's an if, and the guys next to him aren't going to open things up and make things a whole lot easier on him. Then you get to true kind of replacement level depth talk. You've got Bruce Hector, who played some games as an early down run defender for them, not giving you much as a rusher. No pressures last year in 3 starts. I will say this is like a perfect opportunity for one of my guys in the 2019 NFL draft, Deshaun Cornell, who was kind of a 3-tech at Ohio State with a lightning quick first step. Hasn't gotten much opportunity. I think was injured last year, but I look at this group and, there's going to be an opportunity for him to get on the field and rush the passer on 3rd down. So the make or break year for him, but I do want to keep an eye on him. We mentioned Josh Pascal, and, that's probably the dream, right? Is you go Aleem McNeil and Josh Pascal are your interior rushers, 2 very unproven guys, but I can definitely see a world where that turns into a good interior relationship. But I do think that's just going to take a lot of time. So not expecting much at all there. You got Eric Banks, Demetrius Taylor, 2 lighter guys that might make the team and provide some quickness. But it's the worst interior rush in the league, elevated by a damn deep, good edge group. A lot of different bodies here. Aaron Glenn's going to be able to get creative and manufacture some pressures. But with the lack of true interior presence, there's going to be some games where they're just not getting a whole lot of push. So there's your pass rush. It ranks 23rd. I think it will be much better from what it was last year, but there's definitely some stuff that they still got to figure out, to say the least. Then you get to the linebackers and their coverage and just the coverage unit as a whole. This is where I think they're going to need a couple years to really add talent. These linebackers just aren't very good cover players. Alex Anzalone kind of is what he is. Good veteran, presence in the middle of the field, but I don't think you're expecting too much from him. And then Derek Barnes is a really good athlete with some upside. He's going to get a full year this year to, I think, prove what he can do as a true 3-down linebacker. This guy was an edge at Purdue, like straight up was a defensive end. They drafted him, took some time to get on the field, but I do think played really well down the stretch. So I do like Derek Barnes. I think the talent is there for him to be one of their 2 starting linebackers for whatever future version of this defense you can picture. But that just has to go out and prove it, show that he can understand routes and play with those instincts. It's just entirely unproven at this point. You have a couple interesting bodies Chris Board, kind of a replacement level, backup, career type. Malcolm Rodriguez, I really like as well. So, Barnes, I think, gets that runway this year. Rodriguez is going to have a hard time beating out Anzalone, but I can definitely picture a world where it's Rodriguez and Barnes as your linebacking duo of the future. Again, we'll see if Rodriguez can get on the field, but I really like Malcolm Rodriguez. I thought the difference between him and Nakobe Dean was very marginal, and that's, it's a hot take, but Rodriguez is faster. I think he's a more instinctive, smart cover player, and is, a little more physical, taking on blocks and stuff. The difference would be, I think Nakobe Dean has a little bit of a better processor as far as breaking stuff down, but it's not like Rodriguez is bad in that front. So to get him in the 6th round, I think could be a huge steal. Could have a role in some of their 4-3 base packages as a weak side backer, but definitely want to keep an eye on him as a day 3 rookie that I really liked. Then they bring back Jarrad Davis. Couldn't stay healthy for the Jets last year. A really good blitzer, good special teamer, but at this point, you're not counting on Jarrad Davis, former first-round pick for these Lions, to do anything there. Sean Dion Hamilton, a couple years ago, was a decent starter, so good depth there. Woods and Pittman got on the field a little bit last year. I would just say Rodriguez and Barnes are the two guys you're hoping to kind of reach their potential and become your linebacking duo at some point. But not a linebacking group you're excited about what they're going to bring to the table this year. Maybe later in the year, but coming into the year, I ranked them 31st. I don't think this is a group that's going to play with a ton of discipline and take a whole lot away over the middle of the field, and that could hold this coverage group back. Then you get to the secondary, and there's some pieces I like here for sure. You don't have any stars, and you have some potential weaknesses here. So A.J. Parker in the slot, we'll see if they start him or Mike Hughes. Just kind of knowing the way Dan Campbell talks and breathes this, idea of competition and kneecap biting. A.J. Parker was one of those players that really earned an opportunity and impressed and got better as the year went on from the slot. I think they might reward him with that opportunity. But Mike Hughes is just a straight up better player. A guy that just didn't work out in Minnesota as a first-round pick. Probably never should have been a first-round pick, honestly. But was still pretty solid prospect and had a good year for Kansas City last year. So, we'll see how that competition plays out. I obviously think they would be better just going with Mike Hughes. I don't think Parker has the coverage ability to really hang consistently in the slot. And even as a run defender, he's a high effort guy. He had some highlight plays, but even there he had missed tackles and wasn't always getting off blocks. So my gut tells me they're going to go with Parker, but my brain says just play Mike Hughes. So we'll see who they end up going with. It's a smart coaching staff, so it could very well be Mike Hughes, but let's not act like Mike Hughes is some superstar either. Then on the outside, you're intrigued, right? You've got Jeff Okudah, basically his second season. Cornerback is a really hard position to play, and he had a really awful rookie season. Was just getting picked on as if he was a 6th-round pick. Really won with great technique at Ohio State, but it just wasn't all there for him at the NFL level, and he doesn't have elite athletic traits to really make up for when he loses early in the snap, really. So a big year for him. Was the number 3 overall pick, and he has the upside to be a starting corner, a really good starting corner, but he just has to prove it because that rookie year was so bad. Opposite of him, you have Amani Oruwariye, who was outstanding last season. 6 interception season. Honestly, Cowboys fans, if you're watching, I'm sorry, but the difference between Amani Oruwariye and all-pro Trayvon Diggs, flip a coin. I don't care. They're both very similar players. Great ball skills, physical dudes, risk-taking guys with good, not great athleticism and solid size. Sorry to say it, Cowboys fans, but Oruwariye is a good player. I think he's, kind of just a number 2 guy. We have never seen lockdown corner play from him. there's no reason he can't continue to get better and be that. It's just not something we've ever seen from him. So I like Arouarier. Maybe in a contract season, he has a huge, I mean, he had a huge year last year, but maybe he has, an even better year from a consistent, snap to snap coverage perspective. And, he's going to have to earn a big contract, but he's definitely a player to keep an eye on this season on this defense. As far as, is he going to be a franchise corner for you, or do you maybe let him go and address that position next year? So a big year for him. And then your safety group, it's solid. It's better than what they had last year. Tracy Walker, I love that they bring him back. He had a really good year last year despite just utter garbage around him. It's incredibly difficult to be a consistently good safety when you have no pass rush and your corners are constantly getting beat. It just puts you in an impossible situation. And even then, he was still really solid. Love what he does coming downhill as a run defender and a tackler. We'll hit on that in just a moment, but they get him back, and I wouldn't be surprised if he even exceeds that 79 ranking and eventually becomes like a top 10 safety in the league. But he's a really good player, and they got him back on a pretty, team-friendly contract. So love having him. Deshaun Elliott, I think, is a little overrated because he played at Texas and he played it for the Baltimore Ravens, and, he wears number 32, and, he's got a dope name. Like, I think he gets a little bit overrated because there's a swag element to Deshaun Elliott's game, but he's just a fine safety. Like, I don't know. I've always felt like they could upgrade from Deshaun Elliott, and the Ravens agreed they do that this offseason. Eventually, I think the Lions will upgrade from him as well, and that's what they're hoping to get in Kirby Joseph. But he'll be a, experienced starter that's just a kind of well-rounded, capable safety right away. I'm not trying to shred the signing. I've just definitely in the past gone at it with some Ravens fans that, like, they thought Deshaun Elliott and Chuck Clark was like the best safety duo in the league. Like, it's not. It's a good-looking safety duo. I like both players. But come on now, Elliott will lose in man coverage. He doesn't have great range as a free safety, doesn't have these crazy ball skills. Like, he's a solid player. I like the Kirby Joseph addition. I like him as more of a split safety or a strong safety type of guy as opposed to more of a true free safety. And this team actually was up there in the league as far as cover 2 last year. A lot of cover 4, just kind of mixing up the coverages, a lot of disguised looks. So, really in any role other than like a true rangy free safety type, I like Kirby Joseph. I think Deshaun Elliott is actually not a terrible comp for Kirby Joseph. Really long arms, though, and a guy that is, I think, going to get on the field as like a dime back to cover some tight ends, and I expect we see 200 snaps or so from Joseph. And maybe as we head into 2022, they feel good about him as a full-time starter. But I don't see him outing Deshaun Elliott in year 1. You got CJ Moore as your fourth safety. Good special teamer, has a lot of speed, made some plays last year, so he's fine. Keep an eye on Brady Breeze as well. I really like Brady Breeze coming out of Oregon. He didn't stick in Tennessee, but I like the addition there. Yeah, we'll just keep an eye on him. Juju Hughes as well, fun Hard Knocks player, but going to be a tough room to make. And then the cornerback depth that we haven't talked about, Will Harris actually finished out the season as a corner for this team last year, and I thought he looked just miles better at corner than he ever did at safety. So I think they keep him there. He actually led the defense in snaps last year, was the only defensive player to get over 1,000 snaps. So they definitely like him. He's just not as good as a lot of these guys, but as a fourth corner, maybe as a slot corner this year to compete with Hughes and AJ Parker with some of that safety experience, I expect he gets in the mix and makes that slot corner competition a little bit tough. You got Jerry Jacobs, who played on the outside for this team last year, providing really good depth, was impressed by him. I actually thought he was better in coverage than AJ Parker and did it from the outside. Afetu Melifonwu was not a big fan of his game, honestly, coming out of Syracuse. Pretty, irrelevant rookie season, I would just say. A big-bodied guy, might play some safety. I don't know. I don't think he's the athlete to play really corner. I don't think he's quick enough for the slot. I don't think he's fast enough to play on the outside. So good depth, I suppose, and a versatile D-back that can handle some tight ends for sure. But I've just never been a huge Melifonwu guy. I thought they overdrafted him a little bit, or at least the hype was a little bit too big on him. coming out, some were mocking as a first round like player that was stolen by the Lions. I don't know. I think he went, late day 3. I think that was about right. Late day 2, early day 3. I think that was maybe about right. Chase Lucas, experienced corner coming out of Arizona State, but not a great athlete, slender guy. You're going to have a hard time, becoming a starter in the NFL. Mark Gilbert also got to keep an eye on. We'll see if there's room for him on this roster, but a dominant corner at Duke. Had a lot of injury stuff, double hip surgery, I think, and gets on the field and plays pretty well last year. So you do have a deep group of corners. You just don't feel great about any of these guys being number ones. But Okudah and Oruwariye, you can see a world where these guys have better years and become like, a good duo, at least in the future. But 26th ranking for DB coverage, I think is very fair. 31st for linebacker coverage. They just have a lot of work to do with this secondary unit. It's definitely the biggest problem for this team because at least the interior pass rush, I think they'll improvise with guys like Pascal and Ali McNeil. I do think takes a step up, but the secondary, I really feel like they need a few more bodies that are high-end starters. I think some upside, but just might take a little bit more time than getting there this year. Let's rip through the run defense. It's not good. They don't have any gaping problems here, but they don't have a single guy that I point to and oh yeah, he's going to shut down the run, right? On the edge, you have Aiden Hutchinson, Romeo Okwara are going to get the majority of the snaps there. I really like what Josh Pascal can do from a run defense perspective, but I don't know how much he's going to play from the edge. Whereas if you're asking him to play 3-tech on early downs, I don't think he's going to hold up quite as well. Maybe I'm wrong, but I just don't see him getting a massive amount of run defense snaps. Okwara, Julian Okwara, and Charles Harris are, just fine backups, nothing crazy there. Julian's definitely a slender guy and will get moved around. The interior group, giving a ton of benefit of the doubt here to Michael Brockers, who just has not been the same player. I give him a 72 grade out of respect for, years ago. He was a really good run defender, but frankly, he hasn't been that guy for a couple years now, so that might be too generous. Ali McNeil, I do think, can play nose and be their best interior run defender, by a landslide. I really like Ali McNeil. He's the one kind of saving grace for me on the interior. I'm just not terribly optimistic about Levi and Wuzurike. So bad as a rookie. Needs to put on play strength. He was an opt-out guy in 2020. Just a guy that has everything to prove. Bruce Hector, okay rotational guy. We've talked about, this interior group is it's the worst in the league. So that is obviously going to hurt. I think the linebackers are definitely better run defenders than they are cover players. Both guys have size. Anzalone is just kind of a, capable all-around linebacker, jack of all trades, master of none, if you will. Derek Barnes, especially when we want to talk about run defense, and we didn't really talk about Barnes as a blitzer as well, where he's really good. It's hard to kind of make time to talk about some of these blitz specialists at linebackers, but it's worth noting for Derek Barnes. But yeah, the dude's a former D-end. He's really strong. He's incredibly fast. Had some missed tackles, was a little bit late to diagnose runs in his first year as an off-ball guy. So you ding him for that, but definitely room to improve there. I'm optimistic in general about Derek Barnes. It's just he's got to get there. Not too optimistic about the rest of the linebackers there from a run defense perspective. Malcolm Rodriguez, again, the guy I'm keeping an eye on to see how much playing time he can get, but a player I liked a lot. Makes a lot of sense as a smaller counterpart to Derek Barnes. Tough dude that's not afraid to get dirty in the trenches despite being 5'11", 225 pounds. And then in the secondary, there's honestly not a single guy that I point to and oh yeah, he's going to come down and provide a ton of support against the run. None of these guys suck against the run. They all give effort. They all have an element of strength and tackling consistency. But, you don't have your Jamal Adams. You don't have your Desmond King in the slot or Kwan Williams or whoever it may be. You don't have that physical presence from a defensive back with any of these guys. I will note that Tracy Walker, is the best of the bunch here. He's never been some dominant run defender, but he brings it. Like, he's a good tackler. He's fast to the ball. I do like what he brings to the table for sure from that kind of third level of the defense. But I also don't think, you want him coming up playing box linebacker on 3rd and 1 and expecting him to, make a play. So they rank 30th for DB run support. Overall, I've got this as the 31st best run defense in the league. And a big part of that is a lack of interior defensive linemen. And then lack of, elite talent beyond that to elevate anybody else. So needless to say, the defense, they're going to need some time. And I think they're going to need another year or two to add free agent talent, to add more talent through the draft. Because there's a couple players that you think will be on this defense in a couple years, but there's a chunk of guys that just kind of need to be aged out. Guys like Anzalone, Deshaun Elliott. We'll see about Arawariye. I think they need a slot corner. Michael Brocker is there's just a lot of work to do. And they rank 30th for overall defense. And that's going to put a ton of pressure on this offense that's just probably going to make things really tough on this group and keep them out of playoff contention. But, I don't want to lose track of the fact that I am optimistic about the Lions. I ranked them 24th, which is pretty damn good for a team that picked 2nd in the draft last year. They also rank 10th for special teams. Not going to talk too much about that, but it is worth noting that not only did they cover kicks really well and the depth showed in that department, and they really bought into special teams under Dan Campbell, but they had a kicker in Riley Patterson who came on at the second half of last year, who it looks like they're going to go with, so maybe an ascending kicker there. Good punter in Jack Fox, so it's a good special teams. Got Khalif Raymond returning some punts as well, so 10th for special teams, something you're going to feel pretty good about moving forward. And sticking with that sort of optimistic tone to wrap up this video, let's talk about this team's schedule, their Vegas over-under, and my win total expectations. And I'll just lead with this. This is the only over-under bet that I have at the moment, with my own money, is I bet the over on the Detroit Lions. Not only am I higher on this team than I suppose consensus, ranking them 24th, but their schedule's a freaking joke, man. I will be pretty surprised if they don't get to 7 wins when they play the Bears twice. They get to play the NFC East. So you're talking about the Giants, Washington. I even think Philly and Dallas, maybe you could steal one there. They have a last place schedule, so they get to play the Panthers and the Seahawks, and then they play the AFC East. So you get the Dolphins and the Jets. You might have to sweat it out a little bit. You might have some games from Jared Goff where you're left scratching your head and he just, it's not all there and he can't really elevate anything. But, that stretch, I could see them sitting there with 3-4 wins. And then you get a stretch in the second half of the year where you got the Bears twice, the Giants, the Jags, Vikes at home, Jets, Panthers. They could pick up 7 wins in the second half of their year alone, especially as they get Jameson Williams healthy and all that stuff. So I really like the over on Detroit. I think with a regular schedule, I think 6.5 wins is about right. But because they do have such an easy schedule, I really like this bet. I've made it myself. And I guess that's about as big of a positive endorsement as I can give a team, is that I put my own money on them to exceed expectations. So I will just end on that note. Really fun video, you guys. I hope you enjoyed. Do let me know what you think. I really appreciate all the comments. One of the best parts about this series is not only do I go through and reevaluate each team, but I get so many little notes and tidbits from you guys in the comments. So I appreciate that to improve my own analysis and to improve how well this video does, because the comments help the old algorithm gods. But anyway, let's get out of here. Please do hit that like button. We'll see you in a few more days. Obviously, the 4th of July here, I won't be working, but I'll see you in a few more days. Maybe Wednesday, Thursday for team number 23. Peace out, everybody. It's good to be back. Hope you enjoyed. Cheers.